Hi there, I'm here having a virtual cuppa with Carli Bowman, talent acquisition team leader from EmploySure. EmploySure are outsourced HR subscription service provider. You've probably seen them on social media a fair bit. But Carli's here to talk to us about her view on the COVID crisis, how businesses are coping with it, predominantly from the viewpoint of talent acquisition, the team she runs within EmploySure. How's it going, Carli?
Yeah, really good, Simon. Thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Good. Got my cup of tea.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
That's all right. Yeah, Carli. I mean, we were chatting before, but I sort of wanted to. First, I wanted to ask you was what are the sort of things that you're being asked by your stakeholders, by your team, by candidates, by employees within EmploySure? What are the sort of common things that you're getting asked? Problems you're facing?
Yeah, from a talent acquisition perspective, I think probably the biggest thing, it comes and goes in waves. At the height of coronavirus, there was a lot of questions around how is the company doing, what's the future, what does the future hold for EmploySure, what does the viability of the company look like in the coming months. I think just unfortunately with so much uncertainty in the market, a lot of candidates are looking for that validation that they're probably not going to get let go again in 2 months, 3 months time. Other questions I'm finding are really common are around onboarding. So do I need to come into the office? Do I work from home? What equipment am I provided if I do work from home, which some of the roles naturally will do? Also as well, we're getting a lot of questions from me if we do have some of the roles do require face-to-face interviews, potentially around some of the steps that we're taking to avoid contamination or make sure that people are safe when they come into the office, and also make sure that people are safe if they do start and they are in a predominantly office-based role. So there's a lot of discussions around the safety the steps that we're taking to increase safety, increase sanitation, specific interview rooms for candidates, and all this stuff that you probably wouldn't have got 3-4 months ago, to be honest. From an internal perspective, we're finding that which I'll speak probably about a little bit more, but definitely an increase in what does my job look like long term? Can I work from home more? Does this job require me to come into the office for 5 days a week? And people really looking at the flexibility within their work at the moment is probably the biggest questions I'm getting from both sides of things.
How's the sort of talent acquisition function within the company? Obviously, as you know, recruitment of new people, I suppose I imagine would have dropped off inevitably for a little bit. How's the sort of talent acquisition function changed or evolved due to COVID? Is it changed dramatically, or is it more sort of gradual evolution?
Yeah, I think probably one of the biggest changes for us has been the use of technology during interviewing as well. So I love video interviews and I love stuff like that, but ultimately I really like to meet people face to face. I just think that if you meet someone and you get to see them and you shake their hand and you get a bit more of a feel for the person's body language and all that kind of stuff. So one of the biggest changes for us has really been having our stakeholders and our recruiters using online video tools such as Zoom, like we're using today, and being able to kind of adapt and coach on what we should be looking for, or potentially like increase screening to make sure that we're still getting the same out of those interviews. That's probably been the biggest change for us. Other than that, in terms of group recruitment, and we were a big fan of group recruitment. We love entry-level candidates who we can train up and mold to be EmploySure superstars. We recently had a group recruitment night, which was a lot less people than we usually would have, a lot more space between people, and that was very interesting to see the kind of shift and change in that recruitment.
So you still do that in person?
Yes, so we had normally in these nights we would have 35, 40 people come to these group recruitment nights, and we would normally hire 12, say, but we've decreased that excessively. So we normally have now about 12 people in a group recruitment evening, which would be in a large room. They'd all have 1.5 meters spread out from their chairs. They wouldn't be allowed to touch each other. They'd sanitize when they come in the room. it's very, very different to what we've experienced before, which means that we need to run more recruitment nights to get probably the numbers and the headcount that we need. But that has also been an interesting transition for us, along with the kind of use of video technology has probably been the main two.
So you didn't think of doing sort of group recruitment via sort of the Zoom sort of format, or is it just that was just not an option?
It just wasn't an option really for what we were doing as well. It's quite an interactive evening. There's a lot of like tasks and challenges, etc. We found it too challenging to move over to Zoom, so we effectively just stopped it until we could, until it came to a time more recently in New South Wales. Of course, the likes of Victoria, that definitely is not the case, as they're in full lockdown. So we're effectively just taking the government advisory day by day in each of the states to what we can and can't do and what we should and shouldn't do. So it's an ever evolving beast from our end, from a recruitment perspective.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm chatting to a lot of people in the talent acquisition world, people in that function, obviously, particularly for in the height of COVID, when everything just went into complete lockdown, and recruitment didn't stop, but it definitely slowed down dramatically. I mean, how did you and your team adapt to that and sort of, I suppose, keep relevant to the business and keep adding value to the business through that crisis?
Yeah, so there was definitely a couple of things that we done. So we went from having a number of open roles on to having effectively zero at one stage. What we used that time for was really to get ourselves organised. We've been a massively grown company, should I say, for the last. We've only been about for 9 years. We've currently got about 900 staff at the moment, and that's more than doubled in size in the 2 and a bit years that I've been here. So one of the challenges that we've had coming from a small business to quite a large business now is previous systems and the way things were set up weren't working for us, but with the growth and the needs of the business, the time, and we were quite time poor in terms of fixing these processes. One of the things that we've done really was take a look at the back end. How can we fix this? How can we make it better? So when stuff comes back on, which we're starting to see an increase now, how can we make sure we're super organised? It's working the best for the candidates are getting the best experience, everyone's getting feedback within the relevant time frame, and we're just really, really on the ball. So that was one thing that we had a huge focus on when recruitment was slow. A number of members of my team specifically ended up helping with a number of other areas in the business. I think luckily we are an HR consultancy business, so we deal with small businesses every day who, the restaurants, the cafes, the bars, the people that were really affected by coronavirus, the people that really needed help with JobKeeper, that really needed help with stand down. So we had a number of our team learn ER. They were on our Facebook Live feeds, giving clients advice and becoming ER experts. We've had one of my team go into sales. She's doing amazing in an outbound sales role at the moment and really adding value and getting new clients on board to get that help. We've had people go into all kind of manners of roles. We've had people going into L&D and lots and lots of other manners of things. And also with Ergonomics, which is one of our new products that we've launched, effectively looking at ergonomics of our current staff members. We've had a number of the talent acquisition team actually conducting those ergonomic assessments and actually upskilling themselves in work health and safety as well, which has been really, really excellent to see. And now that we're starting to pick up, they're coming slowly but surely back into talent acquisition, which is great for me. But yeah, it's a lot of adaptability and a lot of other things that we've definitely shown and added value, I think, in other areas of the business while recruitment was slow.
Yeah, I've noticed there's quite a lot of businesses, or I went to our local pub I haven't been to for 3-4 months the other day, and I went back to martial arts, and they've all done renovations and everything's got clean lick of paint on it. And I think people have just been conscious of going, okay, well, I'm going to use this time constructively, fix stuff that was broken I never had time to fix. And well, I mean, obviously within talent acquisition, but also EmploySure as a whole, EmploySure has been quite at the forefront now on social media in terms of putting out a lot of information and data and useful stuff for businesses. What sort of information have you had access to, or have you been seeing that you think people will be interested in, that maybe is sort of specific to you, to your role, or to Employ Sure?
I think probably the biggest thing that's come out of it in terms of information for us has been the kind of research done on the amount of people wanting flexible agreements now, working from home. Is probably the biggest one for us. From an internal perspective, we have naturally not transitioned back to the office. We have a very limited amount of people in our offices, no one in Victoria, of course. And what we found is that doing some kind of research in the background and obviously hearing what other companies were finding out in research that they'd done, was that pretty much everyone was going to come to us with some kind of flexible working agreement. When you have 900 staff, a lot of flexible working agreements to get us through, unfortunately. So one of the things that we've had to really do, and my direct manager has been really involved in, is she also manages our workplace experience and our property, looking at what does the future look like for Employ Sure and Employ Sure staff. What does flexible work look like, and kind of reassessing the lines of flexible work. And we always had flexible work agreements in place, but I think one of the things that we've noticed is this has kind of been the biggest work from home experiment that the world has ever done. With a lot of roles that we traditionally thought couldn't work from home actually can successfully. So we've been really on the front foot, and we've been through a process with all of our teams to discuss around what flexible work looks like for them in the future, how many days naturally they'll be able to work from home even when we get back to a new state of kind of normal, and how many days they will have in the office, which pretty much every team's working life will look different at the other side of coronavirus now, which is a huge opportunity in terms of space and property. Saves us money on seats as well. We can fit more people in the offices, which is good if they're working flexibly. So it's also a good opportunity, I think, for us.
I suppose the two biggest things that I've heard from people shifting to flexibility, from managers and from people working from home, is the kind of productivity levels, or the ability to see productivity levels. People working from home are worried that their manager thinks they're not working, and managers think, I don't know what my team's doing, I can't see them. I'm sure they're busy, I trust them, but I just don't know what they're doing. Have you seen anything around? We monitored, and we got sort of KPIs like the business, and very simple ones to monitor. And we've, if anything, maybe a slight increase in productivity by a few percent, but nothing dramatic. Have you seen any drop off in productivity or increases? Or
I think in terms of, it's really team by team, to be honest. So we definitely, as a company, we're looking at the productivity. Again, it was a big experiment, really, a forced experiment, but a good one. From a work from home perspective, of course, not from another perspective. But we definitely had seen an increase and the same kind of levels of productivity pretty much for most areas of the business. There was probably only one that we've seen a slight decrease, unfortunately, but pretty much 95% of the business was actually at productivity, or potentially, as you said, a slight increase as well there. It was actually one of the challenges I had with a number of members of my team, is I kept catching them on working a lot later than what they should be. So I was actually having to tell people to go home and stop working at the weekends and stop working on a Thursday night at 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. Just because it was so accessible at home. And it's a fine line to balance, I think.
Yeah, I think that's definitely one of the biggest problems we've had is just that actually cutting off from work, and now it's at work, sat on my kitchen table, now I'm at home, sat on my kitchen table.
It's very, very strange, and that's definitely what I even found myself in a habit of, just go on and check my emails on a Saturday morning, and just because it's there instead, which is challenging, but yeah, definitely.
Yeah. What if you're I suppose if you're someone watching this is sort of running a talent acquisition team, they're in talent acquisition, maybe a lot of our clients, for instance, will be SMEs, formerly fast growing fintech companies, that kind of stuff, where there is there was a lot of growth and they were very busy, and now there's sort of static or gradual growth. what would be the sort of low-hanging fruit that you would advise someone in that talent acquisition team to do to, I suppose, make the most of this time, or to, you know, maximise the benefits of bringing to their employers at the moment?
Yeah, I think some of the things that we had done as a I think previous to coronavirus, we had like a lot of open roles and we went from having a lot to very little. One of the things that we used the time to do was to pipeline, which we knew that recruitment would come back on. It was just a case of when. We had adverts up that were expressions of interest. We discussed with candidates from the offset to say, hey, look, this is the current situation, it's the current market. This is a role we actually recruit often, and it's a role that's really integral to our growth. When things pick back up, we'd love to chat with you. So we'd potentially put them through the recruitment process, and we would basically stop them at offer stage. So if they were going to be an offer, we would have them and we would pipeline them and we would keep them really warm and keep them engaged. What then happened is when recruitment came back on, we had 15 offers ready to go for that particular type of role within sales. And that was really, really helpful to us. So that is really definitely one way you can utilise the time if recruitment is slower. It really helped with us, and it's something that we'll effectively got us on the front foot, and we're continuously working. We're not chasing our tail as much in terms of the headcount and the targets. It really set us up for success. If you are a business that is recruiting quite heavily, one of the low-hanging fruits that I have found is targeting industries that have probably been the most affected by coronavirus. From a headhunt strategy, utilising industries like hospitality, unfortunately, who potentially have been hit harder, travel, who have been hit harder and have had hundreds of thousands of redundancies, more than likely, through the various companies. That's another strategy that we went with, because we are in a lucky enough situation that we are currently recruiting, so we can probably find more candidates on the market. As more of a candidate heavy market, and we're finding that we're having to potentially source a little bit less and have less conversations to get the outcomes that we ordinarily would have got previously.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're doing a lot of pipelining, just chatting to people really, and trying not to be part of the problem, trying to be part of the solution. Yeah, speaking to clients and talking about, you know, when things go back to normal, what's it going to look like for you, and what, you know, speaking to candidates, that there's a lot of stressed candidates out there. You know, people stressing about having gaps on their CV, and it's like putting their mind at ease and saying to them, look, no one's going to think less of you for having a 3-month gap in your CV through COVID. I mean, it's not, you know, so putting people's mind at ease, speaking to good quality candidates, getting their profiles updated, and then just, you know, that kind of stuff is.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. One of the things that I've definitely noticed is that the kind of the candidate market they're a bit more antsy and they're a little bit more worried. So you do need to be more tactful in your approach with candidates, because you need to make sure you're giving them feedback. You need to be really clear and really honest with the recruitment process, because if you're not, they're naturally in a state of stress, and when people are stressed and emotional, they unfortunately maybe don't react in the best way. And if it's your company reputation, you've got things like Glassdoor and Google and all these other review sites. So that's probably one thing I would be really mindful if you are kind of starting out as well. And what personally I've noticed in the market is just people are a lot more worried, which means that they're reacting probably not as mature a way as sometimes candidates would do.
Yeah, because I mean, we noticed obviously in some roles, particularly the height of COVID, there was, you'd advertise role and you suddenly get a huge volume of candidates come through. And I mean, we're pretty big on getting back to people and trying to give personalised response to as many people as we can. But I think a lot of companies that we spoke to really struggled with being able to get back to people. And then that does reflect badly on your brand. That does, you know, as you say, people are extra emotional, a little bit more stressed. They can mash out a little bit more. And yeah, so there is a heightened volume. So getting back to everyone is just difficult now, I think.
Yeah, it's true. Even if it's, I mean, as much as when you get 200 applications, I definitely wouldn't have time to go back and do an individual response. But even just letting them know, just in a bulk email, and suggesting that they reach out if they want more specific feedback. That's what we try and do as much as we can, and then phone calls with feedback if we have spoken to them instead of emails, and just stuff like that really helps.
Yeah, just give people closure.
Yeah, that's it.
What do you, when you're sort of sat around and you're thinking a bit more philosophically, you know, what do you see as I suppose start with the negatives, really the biggest threats, the biggest negatives that are going to come out of for businesses, or I suppose more philosophically that you think is going to come out of COVID? And on the flip side, what do you think is going to be the biggest positives on the other side of this?
Yeah, it's a big question. It depends on whether you're looking at it from a work perspective or a personal perspective. I think negatives from a work perspective, it will depend on which role you're in. From a talent acquisition perspective, naturally recruitment will become less just because there's less confidence in the market. From a personal perspective, I'm from Scotland. I'm locked in the country because I've got permanent residency, so I'm not able to leave, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges for me. Is what does travel potentially look like in 3 months' time? Do you need to wear a mask for 24 hours on a flight, which is obviously not the nicest thing to do to get back and see your family? Negatives just around potentially just the way that we have to potentially adapt the way that we live our human lives, and how many people you can see at the same time, or how you even interact with people. It kind of goes against human nature, I think, not being able to like shake someone's hand, or not being able to like give someone a hug, or whatever it might be. There's obviously a lot of different implications and negatives to coronavirus from a human nature perspective, from a personal perspective, and from a work perspective.
Just on that, from the work perspective, you mentioned earlier on ergonomics thing as a potential negative, and I think that's quite an interesting and probably underrated negative that's going to come out of this. People working from home. You know, we were talking before we started recording about, you know, sitting balancing laptops on boxes and sitting on, you know, chairs you're not meant to sit on for more than a couple of minutes, and you know, that kind of stuff. I think there's going to be a sort of tsunami of RSI injuries and bad backs and necks and stuff. I mean, are you seeing anything around that? Is that sort of a focus for you if you're employee sure?
Yeah, for sure. Given what we do, we live and breathe fair work, and work health and safety is what we do for our clients every day. If it wasn't a focus internally, we need to kind of practice what we preach as well. So we're on the ball with that kind of stuff normally. As soon as people started transitioning to work from home, we were very on the front foot. What does your setup look like? Do you have a desk? Do you have a screen? Do you have a mouse? Do you have this? Do you have that? So there was checklists that went out even before we were sent from home. When we got sent from home, we then, our lovely talent team had come up with a new product. So it was initially meant for internal staff at EmploySure, called ErgoSure. And effectively we would do a Zoom call and do an ergonomic assessment with these staff members to make sure that their seat was correct. They had their wrists at a right angle, they were at the right height, their screens were at the right height. We would take a picture and do a full review with them. With that success, it's worked really, really well, and there's been a lot of really good information and great feedback. We've now offered it to external clients. Given that we help with external clients and work health and safety, it was a no-brainer for us. Again, we continue to get really good feedback on that, effectively with everyone being forced to work from home. As I told you the story about my partner was sitting in a very unergonomic way, which I'll not go into too much more detail, with his laptop propped up in baskets, which was not great. Yeah. It's been a huge focus for us, and a lot of clients as well. They will have the same issues, and we're not really seeing the effects of it just yet. We're starting to see more people transition back into the office because they don't have an ergonomic setup or an ergonomic chair. And we will no doubt start to see within our clients more claims around ergonomics, because a lot of the clients, especially small businesses, it's not something that they naturally think to check for their staff.
It's not your immediate thought, is it? I mean, your immediate thought is for immediate safety, the virus, you know, but you don't think of, okay, well, if someone sits on a a chair at the wrong height for 3 months, they're probably going to spend 6 months with a bad back, and the productivity implications of that, or the long-term injuries of that. Yeah, so it's weird.
Exactly. I think probably one of the other challenges as well is the not being face to face with people. As someone being in talent acquisition, I love being face to face with people. I love having interaction with my team, and my team love having interaction with their candidates face to face. Unfortunately, engagement is something that potentially is something you need to be really mindful of. Making sure that your staff are engaged and making sure that people aren't kind of slipping off the radar and they're potentially not happy working from home, because you can't pick up on their emotional state and their kind of body language and that kind of stuff when you're not there. So that's probably been one of the other challenges, especially for a lot of our stakeholders who have went from managing a fully face-to-face team to now managing someone completely remotely.
Yeah. Have you done any cool or interesting kind of team Zoom catch-ups?
Yeah, we have, and we had Team Pictionary, which was fun. Before we had a team Guess Who game, which I created not a spreadsheet. I created a PowerPoint, and I got everyone's best fact about their life, and we had to try and guess who each of the facts was about. So we had one of our team used to be a fake bridesmaid for overseas weddings. So people would come overseas to Australia and they would pay her to be a bridesmaid when she was like 3 years old or 4 years old, which we found hilarious. We had someone that'd been with crocodiles. We had lots of like different really cool facts about the team. So that was really engaging. Also, now that we can transition sometimes back into the office, I've made it an optional Wednesday to come in. So people sometimes can come in on a Wednesday if they want. I'm back at the office on a Wednesday and the team can come in, so we can have a bit more interaction as well now that we're allowed. But we've had a lot of like fun online quiz games and wine catch-ups and just the usual stuff that you would normally expect.
I've quite enjoyed them. We did we've done some cooking classes. We did a painting class, which is quite cool.
That's a good idea.
Everyone on Zoom, and we had a teacher, like a proper art teacher, teach us to do portraits. You had to pick someone on Zoom, and you had to do a portrait of them without them knowing you're doing it. And then at the end, we all showed the pictures, and you had to guess who they'd been painting.
I love that idea. That appeals to my arty nature as well. That is a great idea.
Some of them were pretty awful, mind you. I think some very insulted people at the end. I cut you off there when we were talking about sort of the negative stuff. But what about when you're having a glass of wine, thinking, okay, what's the other side of this look like? What are the big positives to come out of this? Because I think there's potentially some big positives to come out of this.
Yeah, 100%. I think in terms of from a TA recruitment perspective, I think one of the positives through this is that, it's a candidate-heavy market for an unfortunate reason, but ultimately when you start growing again, it is a candidate-heavy market, which does make it a little bit easier to find people. One of the things that's really been a positive for us is the view to what can and can't be done outside an office. So It's opened up a whole new market for us in terms of flexible working. Like, can you do this job whether you sit in a Sydney office, or can you do this job if you sit in Perth at home? Potentially, like, does it actually need to be in an office? That's going to be one of the other really big opportunities for TA moving forward. The use of technology within recruitment, I have noticed that we can speed things up a lot with things being over Zoom. People don't have to travel in and spend a lot of time coming to the office. So you can actually get through a lot of things quicker, which is great using technology with recruitment. One of the other benefits I had seen is potentially, like, within my own team, I have 2 people who actually work remotely in different offices, and our main office is in Sydney. They almost benefited, even though other people struggled working from home, because they actually got a lot more kind of attention. I think it's really brought to people's minds how it feels to work remotely and how to work with people remotely.
More of an even playing field, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives you more of you think you know what it's like to work from a different office and not have a team round about you, but you don't really know what it's like until you're not there. So it's really helped, I think, from a management perspective, to manage people remotely as well, if you already do have people remote. I think it's just brought people together more. Like, I really did feel much more of a sense of togetherness working together, like we're all trying to get through it and we're all trying to do our best. And that's really brought a sense of, Employshare already has a great sense of community, but effectively everyone was doing everything that we could do in order to help our clients do what needed to be done, make sure everyone comes out of COVID, we're unscathed, everyone has a job and everyone's safe. And that really showed throughout the COVID crisis, and still continues to show, is the ongoing adaptability and community within everything that we do. To be honest, I just feel like that's been alleviated as well through COVID, and people have really understood how much having kind of personal connections actually means to them, I think. So I think people potentially took things for granted a little bit before, whereas now people realise the importance of it. So I definitely get that sense as well. That's really it. There's probably more, of course, but that's what I can think of over my head.
I think diversity in a workplace is I think there's been some very positive impacts there from a recruitment perspective, hiring, talent acquisition perspective, around, where line managers would potentially be wary, or some people wouldn't have access to roles because they need flexibility for whatever reason. Maybe they're primary carer of children, need to work around school times, or people have physical disabilities, they need access to facilities and it's difficult to get into the city. Blockers to people working, I think a lot of those will be removed or will be lessened, because if you can't ever tell someone you can't be flexible, you can't have flexible hours, or it can be very difficult to say to someone that you can't work from home, or because we've proven that you can. I think I'm hoping that's going to have quite a positive impact on diversity.
Yeah, I definitely do agree with that. It definitely opens up the candidate pool even more. So it's a company that hires a lot on values, and we can, Simon, you've hired for us, you know how picky we can be, unfortunately, in a good way. It opens up a whole new talent pool for us. So it means that we can effectively hire more, faster, and the better people, and people that are going to be right for us in the long term and make impacts on the business. Yeah.
Brilliant. All right, I think that's a really good point to finish out. Thanks a lot for your time, Carli.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for virtual Cuppa.
Thank you. See ya.